When Pontius Pilate stood before the crowd of people who were gathered to hear about the fate of Jesus, he must have been feeling pretty powerful. He had before him a man whom some had called a king, and Pilate knew just what to do with new kings. The pecking order in Roman provinces was clear and brutal. Crush anyone who dared to rise against their Roman rulers. So, like a character in Game of Thrones, Pilate was arrogant and mocking when he asked Jesus, "So, you are a king?" In that television show, even as in life, the abuse of power and the belief that power is best shown in strength and domination is pervasive, but leave it to Jesus to turn all that on its head. He had no interest in earthly power. He did not come to have a kingdom on earth. He came to speak the truth, something that's recognizable to anyone who wishes to see and hear and accept it. The trouble is, sometimes there are things that become more important than the truth. Our fears, our comfort, our safety, and our pride, these are all the kinds of things that can get in the way of seeing and accepting the truth. Jesus came because the people of God needed help in understanding God's truth. He embodied the truth that Pilate never understood. He demonstrated that the greatest power comes not from self-affirming domination, but from self-giving service. The truth is that the power and positive impact of a country comes not from how strong its leaders or military forces are, but from how a country serves the rest of the world with compassion and justice. Just a couple of weeks ago, the 31st General Synod of the United Church of Christ took place in Baltimore, Maryland, and some 50 or more people from the state of Massachusetts attended as delegates, along with a lot of other people from the state who attended, but there were 50 voting delegates about. And they voted on a number of issues, and one of the resolutions put forth was titled, "The Earth is the Lord's, not ours to wreck. Imperatives for a New Moral Era." And the title of the resolution takes its name from the opening of the 24th Psalm, "The earth is the Lord's." The implication of those words is clear. We do not own any part of the earth. It does not belong to us as individuals, as nations, or even as humans. Despite the divisions that we've set up in countries and borders and languages and customs and religions, the truth is that none of us controls what God has created. In the span of 3 weeks just before General Synod, and in response to the news that the United States would withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, 12 conferences of the United Church of Christ signed on in support of the resolution. So here's a short portion of the summary. God's great gift of creation, the context in which all life seeks fulfillment, is in crisis. Driven by material aspiration, humanity's use of fossil fuels since the Industrial Revolution has broken creation's balance. The scale of creation's demise is dramatically expanding beyond our comprehension. Never has the earth and the climate changed so quickly. I want you all to be aware of this resolution that was voted on and accepted by the General Synod, of which we are a part. I want all of you to realize and appreciate our connection to our conference and to our national body of the United Church of Christ. I think it's important that our national body is speaking out in this way. Prophetic voices are often silenced or dismissed, but like Jesus, we are called to speak the truth. Our acceptance and acknowledgement as individuals, as a church, to the crisis that climate change poses is not a political issue. People want to make it a political issue, but it's a moral one. As Christians, we're called to rise above the divisions of countries and languages and political parties. We're even called to set aside inconsistencies and misunderstandings in the history and practice of our own faith. We are far from perfect. Christians have excluded and judged people for centuries in ways that Jesus would not have agreed with. But we must work with every other country in the world regarding how to respond to the realities of the planet on which we live. In the words of Father Richard Rohr, we need to constantly assess our beliefs and actions to find ways to express our faith as a just and generous way of life, rooted in contemplation and expressed in compassion, one that makes amends for its mistakes and is dedicated to beloved community for all. We are people who follow Jesus, the one who came to live in this world, though he was not of it. He came to witness to the truth. He came to show us that the way the world works is not the way God works. He showed us that truth in stories, parables, and most powerfully by welcoming everyone he met. The world is constantly trying to divide us into tribes and groups, trying to exclude one kind of person or another. But Jesus came to welcome all people to practice a way of life that is very different. Call it extravagant welcome, radical hospitality, whatever you want. The truth is that Jesus made no exceptions when it came to who God loves and accepts. We and our spiritual ancestors were so compelled by that truth that we chose to follow it. Over the centuries, we've been regularly sidetracked, even violently engaged by social and political issues and problems that clouded our view of the truth. But always, Christ's truth becomes clear again. It's so easy for those political and social divisions to lead us off the right path from time to time, but God gifted us with superior intelligence among the creatures of this earth, and that intellect has served us well for a very long time. The definition of science is intellectual and practical activity, encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. We arrive at truths about the physical and natural world through time-tested and abundant study and research. But we need to be careful that we don't reduce science to a simple collection of facts. It is more than that. Science, as described in a National Geographic article I read recently, is a method for deciding whether what we choose to believe has a basis in the laws of nature or not. Let me say that again. Science, a scientific method, is for deciding whether what we choose to believe has a basis in the laws of nature or not. In other words, science isn't something that is up for debate or discussion. Science just is. And when the leading hundreds of scientists in the world work together to research, study, and review each other's work, the information they present is what helps us to arrive at the truth of many things. Scientists do not make decisions of preference or policy. The scientific method is based on evidence, and the evidence tells us that the climate change is happening. Our response to climate change is where we come in. Experience shows us that we can and will have endless debates over what to do about climate change and when. But as Christians, we must never lose sight of the truth that Jesus came to show us. Do not be of this world, rather live in it, testifying to the truth that is so much greater than you or me or the words of any of our leaders. Friends, I hope that we resist the attempts from all sides to be pulled into partisan political debate over possible responses to the scientific evidence of climate change. Debating and political posturing only delays much needed action on a number of fronts. The truth is that we are the recipients of gifts beyond our imagination. The truth is that as human beings, we have more in common than anything that separates us. The truth is that we are meant to share all the resources of this earth and respect the earth's limitations of those resources. When we learn scientific truths that tell us of negative impacts we've had on the earth, it is our moral responsibility to act on those truths and find solutions that begin to reverse some of those negative effects. The resolution at General Synod states that as people of faith, recognizing that the earth is the Lord's, it falls upon our generation to embrace the imperatives set forth in this resolution. imperatives that constitute a new moral era. We view the current climate crisis as an opportunity for which the church was born. So the imperatives in the resolution are as follows. Number 1, let our clergy accept the mantle of moral leadership. I speak to you today because my commitment to you and to this church and to God and to the United Church of Christ compels me to do so. I believe that we have a moral obligation to protect God's creation. No matter what I hear from our leaders, no matter the endless debates over facts that have already been established, I know the truth. The earth is the Lord's, not mine. I will never step away from people who in good faith gather to address the needs of the whole world with regard to protecting God's creation. Number 2, let all of us incarnate the changes we long for. I can set a moral example through my words and actions. As individuals, as communities, we can and already do commit to making decisions of integrity in our energy choices, even as we commit to holding our town, our state, our nation, and our world leaders accountable to do the same. And the last imperative is, let us proclaim truth in the public square. In a public square, Jesus testified to the truth. For this I was born, he said, which is why the resolution calls on his words by saying that we, the church, were born to do this. We can be leaders in speaking the truth and taking steps together to address and reverse some parts of what's happening to our climate. The Synod resolution states that when truth is compromised, only power prevails. And so it outlines a few ways to proclaim the truth. Here they are. Let our communities of faith be bold and courageous as we address the greatest moral challenge that the world has ever faced. Let us commit to resist all expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure and demand new sources of renewable energy that are accessible to all communities. Let us do all that we can to change America's understanding of the story that our generation is writing. Let us begin a new story, a story that is not dependent on fossil fuel or on wealth for the few and misery for the many. I mentioned the last time I preached that I've been reading a book called Braiding Sweetgrass: Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. And it's written by a Professor Robin Kimmerer. And at the end of the book, she describes a much-practiced ceremony among her people called Menindawak, or giveaway. And she writes, quote, "In the outside world, people who are celebrating life events can look forward to receiving presents in their honor. In the Potawatomi way, which is her specific tribe, but giveaways are common to many Native American tribes, this expectation is turned upside down. It is the honored one who gives the gifts, who piles a blanket high to share good fortune with everyone in the circle. The giveaway is an echo of the oldest teachings of the Native American people. It teaches that generosity is simultaneously a moral and material imperative, especially among people who live close to the land and know its waves of plenty and scarcity. Wealth among traditional people is measured by having enough to give away. Hoarding the gift, we become constipated with wealth, bloated with possessions too heavy to join the dance. But in a culture of gratitude, everyone knows that gifts will follow the circle of reciprocity and flow back to you again. Jesus came to tell us the same thing. In Luke's gospel, we read, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Generosity begets generosity. It's as simple as that. It's a truth we all know and practice. I pray that we as individuals, as members of family groups, cultural groups, religious groups, as citizens of this country, and as people of the world will hold that truth foremost in our hearts and remember it in all our dealings with others, in our decisions, and in our actions. Thanks be to God. Amen.